My friends, today everything comes down to one decision: the Steelers front office. And don't think this is just more of the same news, because there are many key storylines still to be revealed in this new chapter in Pittsburgh. The Steelers are officially stepping into a new offensive era, and everything about this conversation starts with one undeniable reality. Mike McCarthy is the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that single fact shapes every decision that comes next on the offensive side of the ball. When you look at how this organization is approaching the offensive coordinator search, you can't view it through the same lens as other teams around the league. This is not a situation where the coordinator is coming in to build their own system, call their own plays, and stake their claim as the primary architect of the offense. This is Mike McCarthy's offense, and history tells us very clearly that he intends to run it himself. McCarthy's track record makes that obvious. Across his career as a head coach, he has called plays for the majority of his teams. There were only brief stretches where that responsibility shifted, including a short stint in Green Bay and a few seasons in Dallas when Kellen Moore handled play-calling duties. Outside of those windows, McCarthy has consistently kept the play sheet in his hands, including at the end of his tenure with the Cowboys. That matters because he wasn't brought to Pittsburgh just to manage games or oversee the staff. He was hired because of his offensive mind, his ability to put points on the board, and his long resume of building productive, high-powered offenses. The numbers back that up in a big way. In half of the seasons McCarthy has been a head coach, his teams finished with a top 5 offense. That's 9 out of 18 seasons producing at an elite level. Even more impressive, in 4 of those seasons, his offense finished number 1 in the entire league in points per game. That's not accidental. That's the result of a coach who understands structure, quarterback development, and how to consistently move the ball. Because of that resume, it's hard to imagine a scenario where McCarthy hands over full control of the offense in Pittsburgh. All signs point to him calling plays again, and that reality completely changes how attractive the offensive coordinator job actually is. Around the NFL, the most coveted coordinator roles are the ones that come with autonomy, creativity, and play-calling authority. The biggest names that fans often dream about, the rising stars and established offensive minds, almost all want 2 things: to call plays and to run their own system. That's why names like Joe Brady, Brian Daboll, Cliff Kingsbury, Nate Schellhouse, or other high-profile offensive play callers simply don't line up with what the Steelers are offering. Not only would they be stepping into a non-play calling role, but many of them run offensive systems that don't align with McCarthy's philosophy. For those coaches, Pittsburgh just doesn't make sense. Instead, the profile of the next Steelers offensive coordinator looks very different. This is likely to be someone who has already had play-calling experience in the past, someone who understands what it's like to run an offense, but who is comfortable shifting into a supporting role. More importantly, it's probably going to be someone who already knows Mike McCarthy, has worked within his offensive framework, and understands exactly what the job entails. Familiarity, trust, and philosophical alignment matter more here than star power. That's why Alex Van Pelt immediately stands out as one of the most realistic and intriguing candidates. Van Pelt checks almost every box the Steelers could be looking for. He is currently a senior offensive assistant with the Los Angeles Rams, working under Sean McVay, a system that the Steelers organization has openly admired. But his connection to Pittsburgh and to McCarthy goes much deeper than that. Van Pelt is a Pittsburgh native and a Pitt alum, which already gives him a natural connection to the city and the fan base. Beyond that, he has extensive experience working under Mike McCarthy in Green Bay, where he served as an offensive coordinator. He also brings recent coordinator experience from his time with both the Cleveland Browns and the New England Patriots. Most recently, Van Pelt was the offensive coordinator in New England, where he played a key role in developing Drake May during his rookie season. Even though the Patriots' offense was severely limited in terms of receiving talent, offensive line support, and run game consistency, May still showed promising development under Van Pelt's guidance. That context matters. It speaks to Van Pelt's ability to adapt, teach, and get functional quarterback play even in difficult circumstances. While there may be legitimate questions about trusting him as a primary play caller again, that's not what the Steelers would be asking him to do. In Pittsburgh, his value would come from his experience, his teaching ability, his familiarity with McCarthy's system, and the fresh ideas he could bring from his year in the McVay offense. Another name that fits this exact mold is Luke Getsy. Like Van Pelt, Getsy is also a Pittsburgh native and a University of Pittsburgh alum. His coaching history includes significant time working under Mike McCarthy in Green Bay, where he served as quarterbacks coach and worked closely with Aaron Rodgers. Getsy has since held offensive coordinator roles with the Chicago Bears and the Las Vegas Raiders. Those opportunities, however, came with serious limitations at quarterback. In Chicago, he worked with Justin Fields, and in Las Vegas, he dealt with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Neither situation provided an ideal environment to showcase an offense at a high level because of his background with McCarthy and his roots in Pittsburgh. Getsy is another coach who would likely accept a non-play calling role and understand exactly what he's signing up for. These are the types of candidates that truly make sense for the Steelers right now. This isn't about making a splash or winning a headline. It's about building a staff that complements an offensive head coach who already has a clear vision. The coordinator hire is about support, collaboration, and continuity within McCarthy's system, not about handing over the keys. So when you look at this search honestly, through the lens of how Mike McCarthy operates and what the Steelers are prioritizing, it becomes clear why certain names rise to the top and others fade away quickly. The question now is how fans feel about that approach and whether they're comfortable with a coordinator who plays more of a secondary role in shaping the offense rather than being its public face. What do you think about the Steelers targeting a familiar, McCarthy-connected offensive coordinator instead of chasing a big-name play caller? When you keep digging into this list of realistic options, the common thread becomes impossible to ignore. Every name that truly fits what the Steelers are building points back to Mike McCarthy's coaching tree or two coaches who have already lived inside a McCarthy-style offense. That's not coincidence, and it tells us a lot about how this staff is going to be assembled. This is not about experimenting or forcing a philosophical clash. It's about alignment, trust, and execution. One name that deserves serious attention in that context is Scott Tolzien. Right now, he is the quarterback's coach in New Orleans under Kellen Moore, and the offensive structure there is closely related to what McCarthy has run throughout his career. Tolzien's connection to McCarthy is direct and meaningful. He worked with Dak Prescott in Dallas during McCarthy's tenure, and that period was arguably the most important stretch of Doc's development. Early in his career, Prescott was heavily dependent on a dominant run game. Under McCarthy, and with Tolzien involved in his development, Dak evolved into a quarterback capable of carrying an offense on his own. That evolution peaked when McCarthy reclaimed play-calling duties in 2023. Prescott finished that season as the MVP runner-up and a second-team All-Pro, the best year of his career by any measure. Tolzien was part of that process, helping shape a quarterback who became one of the most intelligent and efficient passers in the league. Even now, Prescott continues to operate within a McCarthy-adjacent offense and remains a bona fide top-10 quarterback. That matters for Pittsburgh because quarterback development is going to be one of the most critical elements of this new era. Tolzien understands how McCarthy teaches the position, how he structures reads, and how he builds weekly game plans around the quarterback's strengths. Another Dallas-based connection worth discussing is Lunda Wells, the tight ends coach for the Cowboys. Wells may not be a household name, but inside coaching circles, his reputation carries weight. He was heavily involved in weekly game planning with McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer in Dallas, not just in positional meetings, but in shaping the offensive approach as a whole. That level of involvement suggests trust, and trust is everything when you're talking about a non-play calling coordinator role. Wells even interviewed for the Washington Commanders offensive coordinator job, which tells you he's viewed as more than just a position coach. If McCarthy believes Wells can help translate his vision to the rest of the offensive staff, he becomes a very real option. Then there's Tom Arth, a name that may not jump out immediately, but fits the pattern in a different way. Arth spent time immersed in McCarthy's offense during an offseason with Aaron Rodgers. Going through what Rodgers himself has described as McCarthy's quarterback school, Arth has established relationships with multiple quarterbacks and has been around the league long enough to earn respect as a teacher and communicator. While he hasn't directly coached under McCarthy in a long-term role, his exposure to that system and his understanding of how McCarthy develops quarterbacks could earn him serious consideration if he impresses during interviews. As you look further down the list, more familiar faces from Green Bay begin to appear. Ben McAdoo is another former McCarthy offensive coordinator, now working as an assistant under Mike Vrabel in New England. He was involved in Drake May's continued development under Josh McDaniels, adding another layer to his recent quarterback resume. Edgar Bennett is another longtime McCarthy employee, currently serving as wide receivers coach with the Jacksonville Jaguars under Liam Cohen. Bennett is widely respected around the league, and his reputation with players is strong. There are reports that Jacoby Myers chose Jacksonville over Pittsburgh specifically because of his relationship with Bennett, which speaks volumes about the impact he has on players. Coming from a staff influenced by Liam Cohen and the Sean McVay tree, Bennett could potentially blend fresh ideas with his deep familiarity with McCarthy's principles. Brian Johnson also enters the conversation as a younger offensive mind. He currently works as the pass game coordinator for the Commanders under Dan Quinn, another former McCarthy employee. Johnson's only stint as an offensive coordinator came in Philadelphia, where he was young and didn't last long in the role. Since then, he has continued to develop, helping with the rapid progression of Jaden Daniels. There are also known connections between the Steelers front office, including Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, and the Eagles organization, which keeps Johnson on the radar even if he's not the obvious favorite. When you stack all of these names side by side, the picture becomes very clear. The Steelers are not chasing a superstar offensive coordinator. They are building around an offensive head coach who already has a defined system and a proven history of success. That's why this hire is unlikely to shock anyone or dominate headlines. If there is going to be a splash move on the coaching staff, it's far more likely to come on the defensive side of the ball, where the coordinator's role carries more independent authority and where the talent level demands a strong, singular voice. On offense, the goal is stability, communication, and execution. Someone who can help implement McCarthy's vision, develop quarterbacks, contribute ideas, and keep the offense operating smoothly without demanding control of the play sheet. Among all the realistic options, Alex Van Pelt continues to stand out as the most complete fit. His recent coordinator experience, his Pittsburgh roots, his prior work with McCarthy, his relationship with Aaron Rodgers, and his exposure to the Rams offense under Sean McVay all combine into a profile that feels tailor-made for this role. Now the question shifts from who makes sense on paper to who ultimately aligns best with how McCarthy wants to run his offense day to day inside the building. That decision will tell us a lot about how this new era of Steelers football is going to look and feel. If you've made it this far, let me know what you think. Who would you choose as the offensive coordinator and why? What makes this entire situation so interesting is how quiet it feels on the surface compared to how calculated it is underneath. From the outside, fans might be waiting for a surprise name or a sudden report that shakes everything up, but inside the building, this process is likely moving in a very methodical way. Mike McCarthy knows exactly what kind of offensive environment he wants to create, and the Steelers front office is clearly aligned with that vision. This isn't about chasing trends or copying what the rest of the league is doing. It's about building something that fits McCarthy's strengths and the reality of the roster. One thing that can't be overlooked is how much this offensive coordinator will be tied to quarterback development rather than offensive identity. Since McCarthy is expected to call plays, the coordinator's influence will show up in the meeting rooms, on practice fields, and in how quarterbacks are prepared week to week. That's why so many of these candidates have deep quarterback backgrounds. Van Pelt worked extensively with Drake May. Getsy spent years helping Aaron Rodgers and later tried to mold Justin Fields. Tolzien played a role in Dak Prescott's transformation into an elite-level decision-maker. Even names like McAdoo, Bennett, and Brian Johnson all come with strong reputations as teachers more than system builders. That detail matters because it signals where the Steelers believe offensive growth will come from. The scheme is largely set, the philosophy is defined. The variable that needs refinement is execution, particularly at quarterback. McCarthy's offenses have always been at their best when the quarterback fully understands protections, timing, and situational football. That's not something you fix with flashy concepts. That's something you fix with coaching, repetition, and clarity. The offensive coordinator hire is a tool to reinforce that process, not